Hello, Margaret Kuhlman here of Soul Astrology. So this new moon in Libra is actually an eclipse, what they call an annular eclipse, which I understand to be the moon going across the sun, but it's a bit more distant from the Earth than at other times, and so we actually get to see the sun all round the edge of it. The moon does get between us and the sun. I always think of that as the personality getting between my awareness and the spirit, which is my source. So I suppose an eclipse does draw our attention to where we get in our own way, shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak. In Libra, beautiful sign of harmony and balance, we possibly work hard to not look below the surface, trying to see things as they've always been, maybe a bit tipsy-topsy, but always coming back into balance, things as we know them, and it is squared by Mars in Cancer in this chart. On an emotional level, we're not going to be able to get away with it, as Cancer has to do with families, with the closeness, the bonding, where nurturance comes from for the newborn. What rises up against this sense that things are all perfectly okay and smooth is however we were conditioned in our early life, and a tendency to act from that place. And we act as fully grown adult people, whereas we couldn't express those things as children. And it's interesting how the Mars is so held within that big triangle, the Grand Trine, with Venus in Scorpio and Saturn in Pisces. Venus in Scorpio, determined to look at the depths of things, everything that's been chucked into the unconscious, being made clear to us through our relationships, our everyday and family relationships. And yet there's Saturn, holding the reins on both of them, telling us that what rises is not just our personal history, it's the history of humanity. It's everything in the human karmic soup. Now this can come as a shock if one's been denying it, or it can be a sense of fatality. There's nothing we can do about this. We just have to live our way through it. And yet, if we have learned from our experience and from the many sides of history as told, we will have that inner stability that comes from being inclusive. If you allow everything a place in reality without judgment, you have a very stable footing. The wisdom of the hermit. Accept it all as it is. Accept what happens as what happens. Not as punishment or shock or it shouldn't have been, but just, this. And then it happened. All we have to do then is to adjust, adapt, take our place, be there. Chiron is also held in a square relationship with Mars. And Mars is moving forward to make that square exact, and will pass it. In November, December, Mars will reach Leo, and then in January it will return and go back over the square to Chiron twice more. The pains of individuals who have been disrespected, put down unfairly, as it seems. And yet Jupiter, connecting to Chiron, suggests, well, a lot of talking about it, but also perhaps bringing out the healer side of Chiron, which is, after all, what Chiron really is, a healer. The wound is the flag we wave to attract those who need healing. So generous, giving, talking about and accepting, asking questions. There's no judgment there with Jupiter in Gemini. And in the background, waiting to be connected in, is the Pluto, Trine, Uranus, both sextile Neptune. Just waiting. In the full moon chart, whatever we were waiting for has happened and is happening. As Venus and Mars, shifting round, still trying to each other, join in with those distant planets. The Sun maintains its square relationship with Mars, and the Moon squares it now from the other side, joining in with Chiron. The Moon is the people, our unconscious also, individually. On Chiron it's as though the wounding really rises, and with the emotional Mars energy at loggerheads with it, we could go into defending the weak, defending ourselves where we feel vulnerable, or attacking even as a form of defense. The Sun in Libra kind of looks on, not perhaps recognizing how to deal with the two sides that are fighting, trying to hold the balance, saying all the right things, that trine to Jupiter, understanding well enough. But what has been released in this chart is the Scorpio Venus. Just hours after the full moon, Venus moves into Sagittarius, leaving the Scorpio depths behind. And of course we never really leave those depths behind, they just come along in a slightly less obvious fashion. But at least there's the attempt to solve situations. Let's have a go at seeing how we can do this. Sagittarius explores and experiments with different ways, knowing that there must be a way, because Sagittarius is inclusive, always knowing that there is more than what we can see already. It gives us perhaps the impetus in our desire to be in relationship, to relate cleanly, to actually ask questions about how the other person feels, what they're trying to do. And although the Venus-Mars still trine in their water signs, they are trining both of them, Neptune, instead of Saturn. So the emphasis is on understanding, including all views, all positions, or people. Neptune holds such a position in that picture. This is almost a complete hexagon. The missing piece is the end of Virgo. All the planets are in earth and water. Earth and water, they are the heavier elements, holding to the ground the weight of water in the pools and lakes and rivers, and the ground receiving. Neptune is where we need to trust, and in that pattern position it holds, we are called upon to trust the universe, the biggest, most expansive, most inclusive ideas that we can have. Love that is spiritual, that doesn't make demands, but simply holds, allowing life to be what it is, people to be how they are. It's very clear where we need to stand within ourselves, constantly reminding ourselves of these things during this month and holding that position no matter what anybody else does. Mercury in this chart is in Scorpio, so our thinking and our communication is probably going to be about these deep issues. But it's moving into a trine with the Saturn. So these deep issues can be accepted as they are and moved on from. I've said it, we all know this. You have to accept how things are before you can affect them. Another teaching says that if you can accept something completely as it is, giving it attention, it has enough energy within it, the situation, to unfold and transform itself. Uranus in this chart quincunxes the Sun. So the holding of this space in a Libran way requires, for the sake of others, that we stand back, that we wait, rather than diving in and acting to have a specific effect. We don't know what effect is required, but Uranus is certainly part of that hexagonal pattern. And connecting with Mars, connecting with Neptune and Pluto and Venus, we are not called to act within the bigger movement of change. Any action we do take needs to be well considered first. And it seemed to me, as the new moon chart shows, that it comes down to love. When we go forward lovingly, that is, open and allowing and not judging, everything is free to be as it is, and the correct unfolding can happen. The linking of the outer planets in the way they do, and the way that's actually getting stronger as Saturn moves forward and Uranus approaches Gemini, we can't really affect the bigger movement of what's going on, not as individuals. So let's hold the light, hold the love, as always. Trust, the big word for Neptune. Trust dissolves fear. Trust that within ourselves we do have connection to the Spirit. If we feel called upon to do anything, let's consider it first, give time rather than dashing in, and do it with love. Thank you. In wobbly times, you need to go inward, digging deeper to anchor your root. From there, your courage will rise up steady, and you may weigh and balance unavoidable human karma as it rises. So it may fall away, leaving life's beauty refreshed.